Have you ever felt completely drained after just 5 minutes of talking to a certain someone? Nothing specific happened, but you're left with this toxic mix of rage, guilt, and total confusion. Sound familiar? If so, you are likely dealing with a narcissist. Today, we're going to crack the code on these master manipulators. I promise you, by the end of this video, you'll have a powerful new arsenal at your disposal. You're about to learn 7 proven phrases that act on narcissists like garlic to a vampire. But a word of warning, these words are so effective at shattering their illusions that they can drive a narcissist absolutely ballistic. But that's exactly the point, isn't it? We're taking the power back. Ready to learn how to make an abuser sweat? Then get comfortable because we're diving in. And while you're settling in, let me know in the comments, who's the biggest energy drain in your life? Is it a boss, a partner, or maybe a family member? Now, before we get to the secret phrases, we need to be clear about who we're dealing with. Narcissism isn't just being vain or obsessed with selfies. In psychology, it's a deep personality disorder where a person wears a heavy mask of grandiosity to hide an incredibly fragile ego. Their entire life is a one-man show, and everyone else is just a prop or a stagehand. They survive on what's called narcissistic supply. That means your admiration, your fear, your tears, or even your excuses. Any strong emotion you give them validates their importance. When you try to use logic, appeal to their conscience, or explain your feelings, you aren't solving the problem. You're just feeding their ego. They thrive on your pain and confusion. That's why the ultimate rule for survival sounds like a paradox. To win the game against a narcissist, you have to refuse to play it. The phrases I'm about to give you are built on this exact principle. They cut off the manipulator's emotional fuel and build a solid concrete wall between you and their toxicity. Let's start with a phrase that works like a bucket of ice water. It goes like this. I can see you're really worked up right now, so let's pick this back up once you've calmed down. On the surface, it sounds perfectly diplomatic, right? But for a manipulator, it's an absolute nightmare. Imagine this, your partner or your boss starts raising their voice, getting personal, and making a huge scene over something completely trivial. In that moment, their only goal is to trigger an emotional reaction from you. There's a common myth that if someone yells at you, you have to yell back to stand your ground. Or the opposite, that you should start apologizing just to keep the peace. But both of those approaches are a losing game. When you deliver this line in a calm, steady voice, you're doing something they find unbearable. You're depriving them of an audience and refusing to play by their rules. You are reclaiming control over the situation and, more importantly, over your own time. Let's break down why that opening phrase is so powerful. Notice what's happening. You aren't arguing over the details of his claims. Instead, you're simply calling out his behavior as inappropriate and stepping out of the game. This creates massive cognitive dissonance for him because his usual script has suddenly been flipped. Imagine this. Right after you say those words, you simply turn and walk out of the room. You have to realize that at this moment, the narcissist is absolutely seething. He might scream after you, slam doors, or flood your phone with dozens of angry messages. But let's debunk the myth that walking away from a conflict is a sign of weakness. When dealing with toxic people, disengaging, both physically and emotionally, is actually the ultimate show of strength. You're demonstrating that your peace of mind is far more important than his tantrum. The golden rule here is simple. Do not return until he genuinely changes his tone. You're essentially using Pavlovian conditioning. His hysterics result in a total lack of attention. Over time, that reflex will stick. Now let's move on to the second phrase. It sounds deceptively simple. You're entitled to your opinion, and I'm entitled to mine. This statement is absolute kryptonite for anyone with an overinflated ego. Why? Because to a narcissist, there is no such thing as two valid points of view. There is only their opinion, and then there's the wrong one. Think about any typical situation, discussing a movie, a project at work, or even how to raise children. A narcissist will fight tooth and nail to prove they're right, belittling your intelligence in the process. There's a common, yet dangerous myth that if you just provide enough logic, facts, or cold, hard statistics, they'll eventually see reason and agree with you. Forget it. In these kinds of arguments, logic goes right out the window. They aren't debating to find the truth, they're debating to dominate you and assert their superiority. By stating that everyone is entitled to their own opinion, you strip him of a battlefield. You aren't telling him he's wrong. Doing that would only trigger another surge of uncontrolled aggression. Instead, you are simply leveling the playing field. You're essentially saying, your reality is valid for you, but mine exists too, and I'm not going to merge them. The result is like a computer freezing up. For someone used to being the center of the universe and the ultimate authority, this calm assertion of your independence is unbearable. He loses his grip. Typically, a manipulator will then try for a second round, baiting you with something like, "Oh, so you think you're smarter than everyone else?" Your job here is simple. Just shrug and say, "I've said all I have to say." You aren't giving him a single drop of energy to keep the conflict going. The third one isn't even a phrase, it's just a single, short word. No. Just no. No explanations, no apologies, and no excuses. It is the most difficult weapon in our arsenal. Let's look at a real-life example. A toxic relative calls you on a Saturday morning, demanding you drop everything to come over and fix their faucet or watch their dog. Your first instinct is to start making excuses. You tell them you're sick, that you're swamped with work, or that you've already made plans with friends. Let's debunk a common myth. Many people believe that if they gently explain their reasons, the other person will understand and won't get upset. No, with a narcissist, an explanation is seen as an invitation to negotiate. They will immediately start devaluing your reasons. Work? It can wait. Sick? Just take a pill. Friends? Are they really more important than family? The moment you start justifying yourself, you are simply showing your vulnerability. But what happens when you simply say, "No, I can't do that," and then you stop talking? A heavy, ringing silence fills the room. It becomes a staring contest. A manipulator will wait for you to keep going, hoping for an excuse they can sink their teeth into, but you stay silent. This infuriates them almost instantly. They'll start to lash out, play the victim, or accuse you of being cold and selfish. You might hear things like, "I knew I couldn't count on you." Your reaction should be non-existent. You can calmly respond, "I'm sorry you feel that way, but my answer remains the same." Remember, no is a complete sentence. It doesn't require commas or long-winded explanations. Once you learn to say it without guilt, you build an impenetrable shield that will break the teeth of any emotional vampire. The fourth power phrase is your ultimate shield against projection. It goes like this: "I am not responsible for your emotions." This is psychological self-defense at its finest. Narcissists love to offload their inner turmoil onto the people around them. Here's a classic example. He comes home furious after a bad day at work, picks a fight over an unwashed coffee mug, and eventually claims, "You're the reason I'm yelling. If you weren't so careless, I'd be perfectly calm." Sound familiar? There is a common myth that in a relationship, you should always soothe your partner or take part of the blame just to keep the peace. No, if you do that with a manipulator, you turn yourself into a human, emotional dumping ground. You'll become the lifelong scapegoat for every bad mood and every failure they experience. With this fourth phrase, you are handing the responsibility back to its rightful owner. You might even add, "You're an adult, and how you choose to react is entirely up to you." Picture yourself taking an invisible bag of trash that someone is trying to shove into your hands and calmly setting it back down on the floor. It's incredibly easy to unnerve a narcissist this way because you are forcing them to face their own shame and anger, the very things they've spent their whole life running from. They want you to be the villain so they can play the victim. When you refuse to play your part in their script, they short-circuit. They might accuse you of being cold or heartless. Let them. It is much better to be seen as cold in their eyes than to be destroyed in your own reality. Your peace of mind must always be your top priority. The fifth phrase is your ultimate shield against gaslighting. It's firm and direct. I remember this situation differently and I trust my memory. Gaslighting is a particularly cruel form of psychological abuse because it's designed to make you doubt your own sanity. Think about a typical example. You know for a fact your partner promised to pick up the kids from school. When they fail to do it and you confront them, they look you straight in the eye and say, "I never said that." You're making things up again. Honestly, your memory is shot. Maybe you should see a doctor. Most people fall right into this trap. They start hunting for evidence, scrolling through old texts, or looking for witnesses to prove they're right. But don't waste your energy. Even with proof, a gaslighter will just claim you're taking things out of context. Trying to prove the truth to them is a dead end. With this fifth phrase, you shut down any attempt to rewrite your reality. Think of it as drawing a bold mark with a permanent marker on the very glass through which you view the world. You're essentially saying, "We can disagree, but I know exactly what I saw and what I heard." This drives narcissists absolutely insane. Gaslighting only works when the victim begins to doubt themselves or gives in to fear. But the moment you project unshakable confidence in your own mind, the manipulator's weapon loses all its power. They lose their primary lever of control. They will get angry. They might call you crazy or paranoid. But deep down, they'll realize that this trick won't work on you anymore. By standing your ground, you've protected your sanity, and that is the ultimate victory when dealing with people like this. Never hand over the keys to your own perception of the world. The sixth phrase acts like a powerful spotlight, shining a light into the darkest corners. It's a simple question. What exactly are you trying to achieve right now? This phrase works wonders when dealing with passive-aggressive behavior. Picture this classic scenario. You're out with friends, and a toxic person in the group makes a biting joke at your expense, disguised as a compliment. On the surface, it seems harmless, but it leaves a bad taste in your mouth. Common wisdom suggests we should just laugh it off or ignore it to avoid looking too sensitive. But silence is a green light for the aggressor. They are testing your boundaries, and if you don't push back, they'll realize they can humiliate you in public without any consequences. If you let it slide once, the jabs will only get sharper and more hurtful. But if you look them right in the eye and calmly ask, "What exactly are you trying to achieve with those words?" you instantly flip the script. Think of it like catching a pickpocket red-handed in front of a crowd. You're dragging their hidden motives into the light. Narcissists are terrified of being exposed. They prefer to operate in the shadows. Faced with such a direct question, they usually fold. They'll stutter and mumble something like, "I was just joking, why are you being so sensitive?" That's when you deliver the final blow. "It wasn't a good joke and I didn't find it funny." That's it. Checkmate. You didn't get defensive and you didn't lose your cool. You simply forced them to justify their behavior. For someone with a fragile ego, being put on the spot like that is pure humiliation. They won't risk trying that stunt with you again. The seventh and final phrase is your emergency exit strategy. It's dead simple. "I will not let you speak to me that way." This is about drawing a hard, non-negotiable line in the sand. Use this when a conversation crosses the boundaries of common decency. If you're facing insults, verbal abuse, or threats, diplomacy is off the table. There is a dangerous myth that you should try to calm the person down, empathize with their pain, or just let them vent. Absolutely not. By standing there and taking it, you are crushing your own self-esteem and giving them silent permission to treat you this way in the future. You must shut it down immediately, without hesitation and without regret. Once you've said those words, you must back them up with immediate action. For example, hang up the phone right in the middle of his sentence, get up from the table, grab your bag and walk out, or simply show him the door. A narcissist will be absolutely livid. How dare you interrupt his grand speech? How dare you be the one setting the rules? At this point, he might switch tactics and start love-bombing you. He'll go from rage to fake kindness in an instant. apologizing and swearing his undying love, doing anything to get you back under his control. Don't fall for it. Your boundaries must be non-negotiable. If you told him you won't tolerate that tone, then the conversation is over until he learns the basics of human respect. And honestly, that day might never come. You need to be mentally prepared for that reality. Now let's talk about the invisible yet vital part of making these phrases work. Your body language. Psychologists call this the grey rock method. Imagine a plain grey stone on the side of the road. It's boring, it doesn't react to the weather, and it evokes no emotion. That is exactly who you need to become when dealing with a manipulator. Let's debunk the myth that you can simply say the right words while crying or trembling and expect them to work. Narcissists don't just listen to your words, they read your emotions. If you say no while your eyes are welling up and your shoulders are slumped, they'll see you're just trying to protect yourself. And that is exactly when they'll turn up the pressure. Keep your posture relaxed but upright. Your voice should be steady, flat, and sound slightly bored. Imagine you're reading a refrigerator manual out loud. That's the exact tone you should use for these 7 phrases. Picture the face of a bored bank clerk listening to someone explain why they shouldn't have to pay back a loan. That is your goal. Avoid sighing, rolling your eyes, or crossing your arms as these reveal your tension. Maintain direct but non-aggressive eye contact. The trick is to look just above the bridge of their nose. This creates the illusion of eye contact while psychologically shielding you from their intense gaze. When a narcissist is faced with a completely blank, impenetrable wall, they lose interest. There's nothing for them to feed on here. You simply become an unappealing and useless resource. Now we have to talk about the flip side. What actually happens once you start using these phrases? You need to brace yourself for a phenomenon known as narcissistic rage. When you cut off a manipulator's supply, stripping them of the control and emotional reactions they thrive on, they won't go down without a fight. In those first few days or weeks, their behavior might actually get 100 times worse. Think of it like a toddler in a grocery store who's been told no to candy. It starts with some whining, but once they realize mom isn't backing down, they throw themselves on the floor and scream so the whole mall can hear. A manipulator does the exact same thing, just on an adult scale. They'll spread rumors, weaponize your mutual friends, and aim for your deepest insecurities. The belief that setting boundaries brings instant peace is a very common and very dangerous misconception. Setting boundaries is a declaration of war against the old status quo. Think of this phase as the storm before the calm. Your primary goal right now is simple. Do not flinch and do not take a single step back. If you lose your cool and get pulled into another emotional battle, you're telling him that your new strategy is just a bluff and that his tantrum worked. You must hold the line, staying consistent with your responses and the grey rock method. Eventually, once he realizes his source of supply has completely dried up, he will move on to find a new, more submissive target. It sounds cynical, but that is the nature of the disorder. Your responsibility ends where your personal boundaries begin. You are not a rescuer, and it is not your job to heal someone else's trauma at the expense of your own well-being. Before we go any further, I need to give you a critical safety warning. The techniques and phrases we've discussed are highly effective for handling psychological pressure, everyday manipulation, or verbal abuse. However, if you are in a relationship with someone prone to physical violence, using provocation or setting hard boundaries can be life-threatening. If you are at risk of being hit, or if someone is physically blocking your exit, forget about the scripts. In that moment, your only goal is survival. The safest course of action is to simply agree with whatever the aggressor says to de-escalate the situation and lower their guard. Then get out of the room and find safety as soon as you have the chance. The myth that words can stop a fist has cost far too many lives. Please always be realistic about the level of danger you are in. To wrap things up, here is the most important takeaway. Dealing with a narcissist is a rigged game. The rules are constantly changing just to make sure you never win. The only way to actually come out on top is to stop playing altogether, to take your ball and walk off the field. The 7 phrases we've covered are your tools for a safe exit. They aren't meant to change the person across from you. They won't make them see the light or suddenly feel remorse. True success isn't getting an apology that will never come. Success is staying completely calm during their next meltdown. You are learning to watch this theater of the absurd from the sidelines without getting emotionally hooked. You will stop second-guessing yourself, stop making excuses, and finally start living a life that is truly yours, free from toxic control. It's a challenging road, but every step forward makes you stronger. So, there you have it. You're now fully equipped. We've covered 7 powerful phrases designed to shut down toxic behavior and flip the script. But here's the real game changer. The true magic doesn't happen when you say these words and see a narcissist's confused face. The real magic happens the moment you realize you don't have to prove anything to them anymore. The peak of your transformation is the day you understand that the most powerful thing you can say to a manipulator is absolutely nothing. Total silence and simply erasing them from your reality. But while you're still on your journey to that freedom, use these phrases as your shield. Protect your peace, your emotions, and your right to a happy life. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you found this helpful, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell so you never miss an update. Your support helps us create more content like this. And before you go, I have a question for you. Which of these 7 phrases do you plan to use the next time someone tries to cross your boundaries? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts.